Weightlifting Scoop, we're back, and we have a good show coming up for you guys. It's about nutrition, and we are with Nick Shaw, the founder and CEO of Renaissance Periodization. How's it going, Nick?
It's going well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. We also have Pendlay and James Tatum here.
Hello. Oh, yeah.
So Nick's got some notes we had posted on Facebook to you guys, so y'all could ask some questions. So you guys have kind of dictated where we're going with this show. And, first of all, let's just talk to Nick a little bit about who he is. So what exactly is Renaissance Periodization?
So we're a company that provides diet and training services for a lot of strength athletes. We work with some weightlifters, some powerlifters, strongman competitors, and, a bunch of like physique bodybuilding type guys too.
Right, so you have experience with a wide range of strength athletes, so everyone's a little different, right? And so I found Nick's experience with different types of fascinating just because, if you're just working with bodybuilders, you're worried about how you look, not necessarily how you perform. So that's what I found fascinating about his background. Now, you just had a baby, right?
Yeah, March 29th at about 3 a.m., so I had to pull an all-nighter. So it was fun, interesting.
Yeah, how's that been going so far? I know it's tough to those first few weeks.
It's actually been going really, really well, knock on wood. She sleeps about 90% of the time, so it's great.
Wow.
Well, that's lucky. Well, congratulations to you guys for that. I mean, I know that's a big step, a big change in your life. So, but I guess now, James, did you have any questions you wanted to?
Well, really just to get a kind of a basic idea of kind of how you go about, giving someone a diet based on, for your average weightlifter, I guess.
Okay, sure. So what we do is we have, the client fill out a pretty detailed questionnaire. They sort of fill out their current diet, and their current training schedule, sort of get a kind of lay of the land of, how much volume they're training with, as that's a pretty big staple of, how we're going to, tailor the diet. And then, we go back and forth. We'll have some follow-up questions, with the client, get everything squared away, because we like to get pretty precise with everything we do, even down to sort of the timing of the meals. So, if client has, work or school conflicts, we like to know that, and we can help, plan their daily schedule around all that.
Yeah, I find that kind of interesting, too, is how you, from what Travis has told me, too, is how you incorporate timing into the diet, and just kind of how certain things work better at a certain time. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, kind of what direction you go?
Yeah, sure. I know that, a lot of people will say, nutrient timing is not, the most important factor, and, they're absolutely right. It's not the most important factor, but especially the higher level you get, you start working with athletes who are on the national scale, international, caliber, nutrient timing becomes a pretty big deal. And, it's not, for the average weightlifter who's just starting out, maybe it's not the biggest deal in the world, but as you progress on, well, the difference between, let's say qualifying for, a national level meet is pretty small. So, these factors become a much bigger deal when you're working with, higher caliber athletes.
Yeah, trying to get that last few percentage of increased performance. Get down to the nitpicky.
Now, when you have new clients and they come to you and you're working with a strength athlete and they fill out the questionnaire, what are the biggest things that you see that are flaws in their diet, their timing, those types of things?
Oh, sure. Okay. So some common mistakes. A lot of times you see people maybe overeating protein a bit, and this is sort of at the expense of carbs for the most part. Because a lot of people, if they're trying to lose weight, one of the things they want to do is they go, okay, well, I want to lose weight, so let me drop my carbs. That's certainly one approach you can use, but when you're focused almost exclusively on performance and strength, it's probably not the best route to go. You don't want to cut your carbs too soon and too quickly, as that, have a big, impact on your performance.
Yeah, I think when the Atkins diet came out, it was a huge thing. It's like cut carbs, cut carbs. And people started to get in that mindset. So obviously, you know, in your opinion and in your findings with working with athletes, like, you know, carbohydrates are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's kind of like you said earlier. You know, when working with, you know, bodybuilders or something, yeah, you can get away with cutting a few more carbs because they're, you know, concerned almost exclusively with how they look. Whereas, you know, with someone who's needing to peak for a meet or anything, you cut your carbs too soon, too early, well, you know, your strength, your performance is going to suffer. So that's, you know, one of the big differences.
So when you look at someone's diet, I mean, what are the things in order of importance? Just in terms of calories, you know, macronutrients, that kind of thing.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So, you know, the number one thing is going to be calories in versus calories out. You know, you can be doing everything right. You have all your macros in line, you know, you have the timing, and, you know, you have the food composition, all that. But let's say if you're trying to lose weight, but you're eating more calories than you're burning, well, you know, you're not going to lose much weight. So that's sort of number one. And honestly, you know, that probably makes up, you know, 40-50% of your diet success. And then to sort of build off of that, you know, number two is getting your macronutrient amount in line. So if you get that in line too, you sort of get your protein, carbs, and fats figured out. Again, you're looking at probably 65-70% of your diet success. And then that's when you get into sort of the smaller components, and that's when you start dealing with nutrient timing, food composition, and, you know, even, you know, touching on supplements. So, you know, those things are sort of far less important. Are they important? Absolutely. But if you sort of get the calories in, calories out, and your macronutrients down, you know, that's the big thing you have to do. You get, you know, most of that right, well, you're well on your way to, you know, being successful on the diet.
Yeah, so I mean, you have two sides to a coin. So in weightlifting specifically, you're going to have the athlete who is trying to lose weight. I guess you have people that are trying to maintain their weight class as well. And then you also have an athlete who's trying to gain weight. So, you know, I mean, weight classes in weightlifting, they range from 56 kilos in the men to 105 plus. So you got a super 56 kilo guy. Obviously, your strategies for dieting are going to be quite different. Now, what kind of differences do you particularly work with? Like someone who has an unlimited weight class, they don't have to make weight. What kind of things would you recommend for them?
Sure. So, you know, someone who's a lot heavier, say a super heavy, you know, it sort of depends on their body composition and strength levels as well. But, you know, the good thing about them, if they don't have to worry too much about making a weight class, is, you know, they're going to get to eat a lot more food. Whereas someone who's, you know, trying to buckle down and make a certain weight class, you know, I mean, you got to get a little bit more specific and sort of cut calories strategically. But, you know, in general, sort of super heavy is going to be able to eat more food. He's probably going to have a higher lean body mass. So he's going to be able to eat more protein, and, you know, depending on sort of his, you know, volume load, he's probably going to be eating more carbs. Obviously, this depends on his strength. For example, if you have a super heavy who's sort of out of shape and maybe not as strong as someone who's a little bit lighter, well, you know, the carb intake may be the same as someone who's a little bit lighter. And then again, you know, sort of figure out your total calories. That super heavy is probably going to need more fats as well.
Well, now when you look at someone and you find you take, you know, you look at pictures, you kind of have an idea of what their body composition is. I mean, what kind of things are you looking at to develop their macronutrient breakdown?
Sure, that's a great question. So, you know, sort of first, you know, you have to figure out, you know, you get their in general body weight. So let's say they're weighing, you know, 200 pounds or so. I'm sorry, that's in pounds. You guys may have to convert into kilos for me.
91 kilos.
Yeah. So, you know, it's probably, and again, I'm going to speak in pounds. So, you know, you're probably looking at about a gram per body weight of protein. So a guy who weighs 200 is probably going to be eating, you know, about 200 grams of protein on average. And then, you know, it sort of depends. So you go from there, you're trying to figure out, you know, how much carbs do you need. And that's sort of really dependent on the volume that they're training with. If they're training, you know, really high volume, say sets of, sets of 8s or something, if they're really far out from a competition, you know, they're going to be eating a lot more carbs than they would, say, if they're peaking for a competition and doing sets of, you know, 2s or 3s or even singles. You know, you eat quite a few less carbs in that case. And then...
I'm getting sick thinking about a set of 8.
Yeah, that's right. I was just going to add, and then sort of you have an idea of sort of what your maintenance calories are, and then sort of the fillers are, so you have your protein and carbs figured out. Well, if you know what you need to maintain, well, the rest is going to come from, from healthy fats.
Nice. So I know Travis has been, how long have you been working with?
We've been working together about 10 weeks.
About 10 weeks. I know you've lost some weight. Your goal was, I guess, to make your cut easier for when you competed. Can you tell us a little bit about how things have gone for you, Travis, and how they've affected weightlifting?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I started working with Nick in Renaissance Periodization about 10 weeks ago, and I took a bod pod analysis both times, and my lean body mass has stayed exactly the same, and I've lost about 10 pounds of fat. Obviously, coming out of Christmas, I was a little more out of shape, but my lean body mass has stayed constant, in which that's kind of the number you're looking at to see if you're going to maintain your strength levels. What I found is initially, obviously, kind of having a calorie deficit, it was tough to maintain your strength, but now that's come back, and I think I'm definitely doing the right thing, especially after doing bod pod analysis a couple times.
Yeah, well, you did just triple 140 from the blocks on a snatch, so.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yesterday I hit a PR triple in the front squat, so I definitely think my strength levels, now. At first I did take a hit, and is that typical, Nick? When someone's on a calorie deficit for the first few weeks, that their training takes a hit, and then it kind of levels off after that?
Maybe it sort of maybe depends on where they were coming off. If maybe you're eating a ton of food, and let's say it's around the holidays, for example, for where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just initially, but in general, I think most of our clients find that their sort of energy, recovery, and strength usually go up, because usually they're not coming from a point where they're eating let's say a lot of carbs around the workout window and all that. So once they start doing that, they find that they're like, wow, my energy, recovery, and even strength usually goes up.
Well, I think it's kind of funny because one thing you mentioned is that people are, typically tend to overeat protein and undereat carbs, which is kind of what I was doing. Obviously, I was eating more calories around the holidays and not really thinking about it too much, but just with kind of the paleo diet being the big thing in CrossFit, I guess I was always thinking oh man, this is a bad food, I should never eat that, and I would feel really guilty about eating it, and I'd be like, oh, this is a good food, I can eat this, as much as possible, and I guess I just kind of got into that mindset and went too far with it, and and obviously I know calories in, calories out, but at the end of the day, when you're thinking good food, bad food, now there definitely are good foods and bad foods, but when you have it written down for you, and you know how much of it you're supposed to eat, it definitely puts it in perspective. So with that being said, so when you look at someone's diet and they're overeating protein, and you kind of take them down and you bring their protein back to 1 gram per pound of body mass, right?
Yep.
And then the rest of the breakdown for a strength athlete, how are you gonna kind of look at that and decide what's the rest of the macronutrient breakdown? How much fat? How many carbs?
Okay, yeah, sure. It kind of goes back to the volume loads that they're training with. So, if they're, let's say, doing higher volume stuff, you're probably looking at, upwards of, 3 grams per pound of body weight if you're doing really high volume. Somewhere in that middle ground, maybe you're doing sets of 5 or so, somewhere around there. Well, you're probably looking at maybe about 2 grams per pound of body weight. Well, that's probably a pretty good start. For most people, even if they're starting just sort of if they're just looking for a base, that's probably a good starting point. And then if you're, say, doing a low volume phase, you're peaking for a particular meet, and you're doing sets of 2s or 3s, even singles, you can probably drop that even a little bit lower to about 1 gram per pound in terms of carbohydrate intake per day. Then, so you have your protein covered, you have your carbohydrates covered, so now you're left with, sort of fats. And so how do you figure out how much fats you need? Well, that depends on sort of your maintenance level of calories. So, you just sort of, fats almost serve as the fillers. So you sort of fill in the rest of the calories there with fats.
Okay. So that's kind of interesting, I guess. Now, when you talk about, you go to CrossFit gyms and they're promoting the paleo diet, I mean, what are some of the things that you see with that are different than what you're doing? Because obviously with the paleo diet, you're trying to transition someone from a lot of carbohydrates into a more protein and fat diet, and it seems to work for a lot of people. Now, why does it work? What are the things that you see that are problematic for high-level athletes, etc.?
Yeah, sure. No, I think, paleo is great for sort of just general weight loss, and a lot of people do have a lot of success because, if you're talking maybe just like sort of an average person who goes into a CrossFit gym, they're probably not, eating super healthy, and so when they start to drop all those carbs, it works great at first. I mean, it works really well. They can, drop quite a bit of weight right off the bat, and they feel great, and, they lose a lot of fat. And depending on if they're new to training and all that, well, they probably gain a little bit of muscle too from eating more protein. But then, what I've heard, from CrossFitters who have done paleo for a long time and sort of, want to take things a little bit more serious, is that the problem they run into is eventually, being on that lower carb, sort of paleo diet, their strength starts to suffer eventually. And so that's, probably the one, big downfall is that the carbs are just a little bit too low. And so if you're able to, bump that up, change the macros around a little bit, you're going to start to see increases in performance and, strength, which is, what, most strength athletes are after, right?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, what role do carbohydrates play in recovery, strength gain, muscle gain?
Just sort of helping replenish glycogen stores from hard training sessions, especially if you're, and that's where, you're training with higher volumes, you eat more carbs because, you're burning more calories, going through more glycogen, you need more carbs. And, and depending on, when they're timed, carbohydrates in general sort of help, block the, catabolic hormones and sort of set you up for a better recovery process. So you're ready to go for the next workout.
Now, one thing that is very popular is carb backloading, which is kind of the opposite of what I found that we're doing particularly. We're eating most of the carbs at the beginning of the day and directly after training to try to replenish glycogen right after training. Now, what is the difference between what you do and carb backloading, and do you agree with carb backloading can work, or do you not agree that that is a good way to go about things?
Well, just sort of real quick, I think, the reason that most of your carbs are earlier in the day, it sort of depends on when you train. Yeah. So if you train in the morning, well, yeah, most of your carbs are going to come in the morning, and then you sort of start to taper off, your carb intake later on. And, even for you, you train sometimes twice a day, so you eat a lot of carbs in the morning, and it stays up pretty high throughout the day. But then let's say you have someone who trains in the evening, well, most of their carbs are probably going to come, later in the day and then, later at night. And, that's okay because you're training later at night, so you can get away with that. And to sort of touch on the carb backloading, carb backloading has a lot of, great components of it, but I think sort of the general thing is, you just kind of, people get maybe a little carried away and they just sort of eat whatever they want as carb backloading. And, that's okay because you're probably going to get a lot of carbs, but you're also probably going to get a lot of fats post-workout, which, maybe is not sort of the optimal route you want to go with, shoving in a lot of fats post-workout.
And now that is one thing that I've found too is a lot of times on the paleo diet, somebody comes and works out and then they go back home and I was particularly eating like a lot of meals where I'd have bacon and eggs directly after training. Now, why would you not want to have fat right after training?
Fats in general just sort of slow the absorption process, so you generally kind of want to keep them lower to, almost not there post-workout, So maybe right after post-workout, you maybe just have a little bit of fats, and then, sort of as you get a little bit further away from the workout, you can add in a little more fats. But yeah, generally you want to keep them pretty low around the workout window.
Mm-hmm. Now, we had a bunch of questions on the Facebook page. Before we get to those, James, did you have?
Yeah, well, one thing I was just curious about, I guess working with a variety of different athletes. And I'm just thinking in terms of super heavyweights. Do you ever find like an optimal amount of fat for a super heavyweight to be strong at? Or like I know some people just try to get as big as possible, and what do you find as far as just body fat percent and or just body composition in general for a super?
Oh, I see. Well, probably the best answer would be, I mean, in general, you probably want to be sort of as lean as you can and still fill out the weight class. Now, obviously, with a super heavy, there's sort of no cutoff. So, it's going to, depend, I guess, maybe a little bit on the height. If you have someone who's, I don't know, 6'4" versus someone who's 6 foot, well, the 6'4" guy, because of his, he's probably disadvantaged a bit because of his leverages. So in order to sort of make up that strength difference versus, assuming they weigh the same, let's say they weigh, 110, 120 kilos, something like that, the taller guy is going to need to probably pack on a lot more lean body mass to sort of make up for the disadvantages that he has, leverage-wise. Make optimal, body fat percentage. I think in general most people want to be, a little bit, leaner. Then it's probably, not a whole lot of advantages, if you're going to be 25% plus body fat. You probably want to be, lower than that.
Yeah, I guess 30% is you're getting into obese.
I don't think a whole lot of athletes out there, strive to say, hey, I want to be, 30% body fat. So I think, most would probably prefer to, maybe be, in the teens. And this is sort of something kind of a little interesting that we found, sort of ideally, if you're trying to fill out to the top of a weight class, let's say you want to fill out to the top of 105, well, you probably want to be, 8, 9, 10% body fat, and maybe just a little bit over, so you weigh about 107 kilos, so you can sort of go into the water drop process, only having to drop a max of 2 kilos, and you've sort of filled out the frame for 105 kilos because you weigh just a little bit over, and you're pretty jacked at 9, 10% body fat.
Now, do you find so? There's a lot of studies in bodybuilding specifically, and I've had some questions about how height and lean body mass are correlated, I guess.
I just think it's sort of the taller you are, you're probably going to need more body mass in general because you're at sort of a disadvantage versus a shorter lifter. Assuming you're the same weight, you need a higher cross-sectional area of muscle fiber to make up those differences.
So someone who is shorter, for instance, I mean they showed that at certain heights there was a maximum, I don't know, lean body mass that you could have at a certain body fat percentage. Now, in actuality, working with a lot of athletes, have you found those studies to be true?
Well, I'd say you could probably push the envelope quite a bit. I wouldn't say there's maybe a cap on them, but let's say if someone's, I don't know, I'm 5'9", for example. I'm sure those studies probably said, I can't weigh more than, I don't know, 200, 210 pounds or something, but, I weigh 225, and so I'm always trying to, push the envelope there, so, yeah, I'm not, sure how realistic those studies would be. Maybe it would be my answer.
Okay, I got you. And now, if someone's within a weight class, obviously, at what body fat percentage would you say, hey, do not drop a weight class?
Oh, yeah, probably to get down to single digits, man. It's real hard to go below that without having to sort of drop the bottom out calories-wise. If you get down to, 9, 10% body fat, man, you're probably, pretty close to filling out your weight class if you're right there in terms of, like for the example, if, you're trying to make 105 and, you're 107 at like 10%, well, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, definitely. And is there a point, so say, if someone was below a certain body fat percentage, you would say it would be optimal to let your body grow?
Yeah, for sure. You're probably looking at about that 8 to 10%. If you're under 10%, well, you can probably do a mass phase. You can try to gain some weight. Maybe 15 is probably a good spot to maybe call that cutoff. Well, if you're over 15, well, maybe it's time to, sort of cut down a little bit. If you're under 15, if you're in that 10 to 15% range, well, you might be able to go either way. If you're under 10, it's probably time to gain some weight.
Oh man, it's not good news for me. I weigh about 82 kilos. I guess I'm about 8.5 or 9% body fat right now. If you were working with someone like me, how far out would you need to work with them in order to, I don't know, get them set up to make weight at a competition? So for me, I'd have to drop 5 kilos, being at 9%, let's say.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this kind of ties back into maybe some of the common mistakes that people make. You don't want to diet all the way into a competition. So, when your volume's dropping and you're sort of peaking for a meet, it's not ideal to be in a caloric deficit. It's just going to generate a lot of fatigue, and you're probably going to see some slight, decreases in performance. So, it's interesting. Travis and I were just talking about this. We're probably going to give him about a month where he's going to be in an isocaloric state, so his body weight's going to remain pretty stable into his next competition. So, if you needed to drop, let's say, 5 kilos, aiming for, anywhere from 1 to 2 pounds a week, which is about 1 kilo a week, let's say, maybe a little under, you're probably going to need, 6-8 weeks if you want to be a little more conservative.
Nice. And then the first part of that is just dropping the weight, and then the second part is just, like you said, an isocaloric state for about a month before the competition, just to adjust to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That way you're not in a caloric deficit, and you're not going to see really any, decreases in performance there that last month. So yeah, that's a, pretty good timeline. So I guess in total there you're looking at what, 10, 12 weeks?
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think most people, I guess, they're kind of like, they'll diet to the competition, and so whereas you would recommend kind of starting out, diet down to the weight that would be easy to do a water cut from, and then maintain that weight for 1 month. Is that correct? And then kind of go into the competition, cut the water from that maintenance weight that you got to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably about the best way to go. That way you don't have to cut a lot, in terms of, the water drop at the end, because, as you guys probably know, if you get up over, say 2-3 kilos, that's pretty hard to drop, if you have a 2-hour weigh-in before you have to go lift.
I would say 3 kilos is probably pretty easy, but anything over 3 kilos, kind of like potential for performance decrease.
Yeah, I've always went by like the 3.5% of your body weight. So for me, that would be a little less than like I'd only want to drop, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 kilos and no more before I start seeing some decreases in my performance.
Now, Glenn, you've been sitting over here quiet.
I have been quiet, oddly enough. My main thing I am listening for is like the last week or so before a competition. What is the timeline that you would recommend as far as what you do 3 days out, what you do 4 days out, 5 days out? How quick do you want to cut that water weight? And I mean, a big belief of, I think, mine and most weightlifters is that the longest you can leave the longer that you can leave the weight on, and the quicker you can cut it. In other words, if you can cut 2 or 3 pounds, say, in a matter of several hours before the competition, so that you only have that weight off of you for a very, very short time before you can kind of regain the water weight before weigh-in. How important is that, and what would you recommend during that last period before you make weight?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much in total agreement with you. In fact, I made some notes to sort of talk about this, but, if you can sort of keep all that weight on until literally the day before, where, maybe all you have to do is drop some carbs out and then, limit your fluids. Of course, this is also dependent on where you are weight-wise, but if you only have 1 to 2 kilos to drop, maybe up to 2.5, 3, like those guys were saying, you drop your carbs the day before, limit your food intake a little bit, limit your fluids that night, limit your fluids the day of the weigh-in. Yeah, it's pretty easy, to drop a couple kilos, and that way you don't have to, you're not going to see, huge drops in your performance because you don't have to drop a lot of weight. I think I absolutely, agree with what you said.
Well, good.
Anything else, Glenn, that you had questions about? Or?
No, that was pretty much it. Just the last period before you make weight, and you're basically agreeing with me, so that's great. You must be right.
Yeah, also
we need some controversy.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I'm just gonna move up to super. I'm gonna prove you wrong. I'm gonna be 30% body fat. How's that for controversy?
Oh, I don't think that.
James, you would not do that. I know you would not do that.
If I would work with someone that could get me to do that, I would be impressed. I mean, that would be a true feat to get me to be a super heavyweight at 30%. Well, I hope that
that'd take some work.
That fills all our controversy for this episode.
Well, so those questions that you made notes on, I made a post on Facebook, and we gathered up some questions. So you want to go ahead and start going through those?
Yeah, sure. It's actually interesting. We sort of already covered them, but I'll sort of touch on them. Exactly. I had a question about, I think a guy wanted to lose about 3 kilos, and he had a good chunk of time to do it. And, if you can, set yourself up to lose, half a pound a week, and give yourself enough time where you have sort of 4 weeks before the meet that, you don't have to drop a lot of weight. You can go isocaloric. That's great. And just sort of, cutting when you're in the real low volume phases is probably not the ideal way to go. You want to sort of get your cutting done, as far in advance as you can, really. Even a great time to do that is the off season. You guys know this. There's not really an off season. If you're a big time athlete, sure, your things may be a little more intense leading up to a meet, but you want to make those big body composition changes. The off season.
The only problem with that is people want to relax and eat a little looser when it's more farther out from a competition. So that usually leads to weight gain.
Sure. Yeah. I guess you just have to sort of be aware
be disciplined, I guess.
Yeah, you just have to be aware of the trade-offs. If you want to maybe eat a little more. Certainly. I mean, I like to do that too. I just ended a 12-week diet, and I'm a little more free with my own diet right now. But sort of the trade-off is, you're probably gonna have to diet a little bit harder, maybe in the long run. When it gets closer. But yeah, certainly, people want to.
One other question I had is does like aerobic activity and general activity level play into cutting? And the reason I ask this is because, some people really feel like the best way to cut weight is with aerobic type activity. And another point of view would be that the less you do, the better. And it's better to cut it with, a diet than it is to walk or run or row or whatever else. So what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say for, big-time strength athletes like, these guys, the less sort of higher intensity aerobic activity you can do, the better, because it's going to likely mean that you're going to be stronger. So, maybe if you do cardio, maybe it's just of the sort of lower intensity variety, and you just sort of get out and do some walking, something that's going to have very minimal impacts on, strength and ability to recover.
What do you think the cutoff as far as intensity of aerobic exercise is? And the reason I ask that is I used to know a bodybuilder way back in the dark ages when I was in college that very firmly believed that there was a certain optimal intensity for weight loss as far as maintaining muscle mass and all that. And he would actually time himself on how fast he walked a mile and walk a certain number of miles at a certain fairly relaxed pace, and he thought that if he walked faster than that would start to cut into his muscle mass. And if he kept it below that pace, that was pretty much pure fat burning. What do you think about that?
We just sort of have a general rule with most of our clients, and these are the sort of the rules for people who are looking to get maximal strength gain, stuff like that. If you're going to do cardio, you probably want to keep your heart rate under about 130.
Okay, that sounds roughly similar to what Heats told me before, so that sounds right.
Of course, he must be right.
Well, he must be right.
He's agreeing with you.
Now, So if you're looking at an athlete and they want to find out what their maintenance caloric intake is going to be, how do you find that?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, I had some notes on that. You know what? It's really much simpler than everybody makes it out to be. You know, how do you determine how many calories you need? Well, easiest thing to do is you track your body weight a couple times a week. And guess what? If your body weight's going up, all right, well, you're probably eating more calories than you're burning. So depending on your goals, then you need to somehow, adjust. If you're trying to lose weight, but the scale's going up, guess what? You probably need to eat less. And that's when, you start breaking down into sort of, where do you start cutting calories, all that stuff. But, the easiest way to do it is to literally just track your body weight, because the problem with trying to, use all these formulas and everything, well, one, they're sort of based on averages, so they're not super specific to the individual. And two, I don't know about you guys, but my activity is not the same every single day. I live in New York City, so if I'm working during the week and I have a couple clients that I train, I'm taking the subway, I gotta go up like 50 stairs to get out of the subway, and then walk half a block, uphill to my apartment. Well, what if I do that a couple times a day on Monday, and then on Tuesday I only do that, once, and then Wednesday, I have to do it 3 times. So it's really hard to sort of track that and figure out the exact number. The easiest way to do it, track your body weight. A couple times a week. You don't have to do it every day, because there's going to be a lot of weird fluctuations on a daily basis. And, if you only do it once a week, well, it's probably not quite often enough, because, what if you have, let's say, like a cheat meal the night before? Well, then it's going to be inflated a bit. So you do a couple times a week, maybe like Monday, Thursday, Monday, Friday, something like that. You can sort of track it, see where it's going, and that's how you determine if you need more calories, less calories, or if you're right where you want, if you're in a nice isocaloric state.
Now, if you're starting with a new athlete and they weigh about 200 pounds, what's like your starting point calorically?
You know what? That's a good question. I don't have a specific answer for that, because it's going to depend on sort of their training volume and their physical activity, how much they do. So you just sort of, and that's where their feedback comes into play. So I don't have an exact number for calories, but I could. Dependent on if, I sort of had, their questionnaire in front of me, I could give you sort of a rough idea on, the macro breakdown. But, and then from that I could, calculate the calories pretty easily, but I don't have sort of a set number. And everyone likes to ask that, how many calories do I need? How many calories do I need? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is usually it depends. It depends on a lot of variables.
Yeah, definitely. So once you kind of come up with the amount of calories that is your maintenance, then you can kind of look at 1 gram of protein per body weight, and then you kind of like decide your carbs based on your activity level, which could be about 2 grams starting out, and then fill the rest with fats. Is that where we're kind of getting at?
Yep, absolutely. And that was actually a question that was asked on the Facebook page by a guy named Brandon. So, there you go. That's covered pretty well.
All right, yeah. Did you have any other questions that you wanted to go over real quick?
Pretty much just covered the few that I had written down. Another one was definitely, how to sort of track your weight and figure out how many calories you need, because there was a guy who asked, specifically how many calories he needed. And, track your body weight and see what happens, and you sort of go from there to figure out the exact number of calories.
Yeah, and you have to be very specific. So, you got to keep good food logs if you're going to try to find your maintenance calories, and you got to eat the same amount of calories for multiple days in a row to kind of see if that's working for you, right? So, if you're out there, would you recommend eating the same amount of calories for like a week straight, every single day eating the same amount of calories, or looking at a week?
Well, it sort of depends on, if you're training one day, your carbs are probably going to be up a bit, but, let's say the next day is a rest day. Well, you're probably not going to be eating as many carbs, and maybe your healthy fats are a little bit higher. So, will that end up being about the same calories? Yeah, maybe. Sort of depends on activity level and all that. So.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else?
I just got to make sure I stay away from Doritos. Man, I check my weight every day, and I had some Doritos the other day, and I was a whole kilo heavier.
Son of a gun.
Damn Doritos, man. They taste good, but...
So what do you recommend to keep James away from Doritos?
Don't
buy them.
it's probably a good idea to, sort of build in a cheat meal. Remember, this isn't, bodybuilding. You don't have to be, 5% body fat on stage. So it's probably a pretty good idea just from a psychological standpoint to, build in a cheat meal sort of each week so you can sort of indulge in those cravings. I think that's a great idea.
Well, one thing I was going to ask is, how do you feel about cheat meals? If you have a cheat meal every week, say, well, first off, how often should you have a cheat meal? And second, what should the cheat meal consist of, and how long should it last? I mean, I've heard all kinds of things from people that are more into bodybuilding on, you should, strictly limit your cheat meals to 6 hours of feeding time or something like that. Something similar to that. How do you feel about that?
I think, a cheat meal per week is probably a good point to start. And then it depends. If you're trying to gain weight, well, guess what? Gaining weight's usually a little more fun than trying to lose weight. So, if you want to, lay off and maybe have, a couple cheat meals a week, yeah, if you're trying to gain weight, hey, that's all right. If you're trying to cut weight, well, probably one a week's probably a good point to start. And then, we usually just tell clients, you sort of have that one meal and, hey, eat whatever you want.
So for someone who is trying to gain weight, now, is there a point at which you're eating so many calories that you find it kind of hinders recovery?
I wouldn't say that. I think if you're eating so much, probably actually, help with recovery, because you're probably eating so many fats and carbs that, probably recover pretty well, would be my guess.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that I had thought about before. I mean, I have no evidence of this. I mean, there might be evidence of it out there. I have no idea. But just like if you eat so much and it's just so taxing on your digestive system that you're getting stressed that way, and you're putting yourself in a constant state of stress. And I guess by people eating way too much, meaning like every 2 hours, large meals, pretty much. Which,
are you talking about Tom?
I'm talking about Tom. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I've never actually spent a full day with Tom to see what he eats. He talks about how much he eats, but I've never actually seen it. So
talk is cheap.
I can't put that directly on Tom. But I have no evidence of that. I was just something.
I mean, I just found for myself, like, if I'm in the off season and I'm eating a lot, or if I'm cutting hard, I never really had good training. But if I was within that certain range, 500 calorie deficit to 500 calorie surplus, that's when I was really like making most of my gains. Most of the time, if it was on the upper side.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. If you're just eating so much and maybe, sort of over that 500 plus, surplus in terms of calories, maybe you're just sort of getting a little sloppy conditioning wise, and like all those calories, it's just sort of, maybe just hindering training in general, because you sort of just feel, a bit sluggish, and, those, depends on, maybe the quality of food, but, it's maybe just sort of, getting in the way of training, which is maybe preventing quality training, would be a good guess.
I can say, as a former super heavyweight myself, when I was at my heaviest, I had to eat things that are fairly easy to digest, or else I would be very tired during the day. I mean, if I was eating pizza all the time or something, I would just need a nap. I mean, I would not feel good. But when one of the things I used to eat when I was very heavy was I used to eat, like 32 ounces of milk and some like bread. I would like basically squeeze and ball up the bread and wash it down with, a big glass of milk. And I could go train after that, like directly after that. I could train easily after that. But certain meals seem to be very hard to digest, almost to the point of taking my energy away. So I don't know what that means really, but obviously I eat much different now. I'm much lighter now. But I do remember feeling very, very fatigued and tired when I ate too much.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you're just so heavy and you're having to eat so many calories, eating becomes, really, really hard. And, it's probably a lot easier, and that's why you see a lot of guys, even in the bodybuilding sense, if they're trying to, gain weight, guess what? They're doing a lot of shakes because it is really hard to get in, let's say, 5, 6, 7,000 calories a day of, clean food, whole food meals. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, I think I remember reading something. What's that swimmer, Michael Phelps?
Yeah.
Posted his diet, and it was something crazy amount of calories he ate every day. And I remember thinking, like, how does he do that? Like,
that article had to be bullshit.
Well,
because it was like, what was it, like 15,000 calories a day? Nobody can eat that much.
Yeah, I don't know. He got caught smoking the marijuana cigarettes a few times, so he might have been lying. He might have been high at his kite right then, so I don't know. But I know swimmers do a whole bunch of volume, so I don't know, swimming.
Now, one last thing that I had a question about now. Now, when you talk about quality of food, there's a lot of people back in the day that were, if it fits your macronutrients, it's okay to eat if you're very precise with it. Now, what do you think about that? Quality of food versus macronutrient breakdown.
Yeah, if it fits your macros, it can be a pretty good guide. Obviously, it's probably not a good idea to be eating ice cream all day long to sort of fit your macros, and I think most people know that.
Oh, man.
Some people, yeah, right. Sorry to burst your bubble.
Barbecue all day.
Yeah.
Barbecue and ice cream. I told you, I'm moving up to super. No.
Yeah, it's. If you're going to eat higher glycemic carbs, it's probably a good idea to do that closer to the workout. Mm-hmm. And, it's probably a better idea to eat your lower glycemic, healthier carbs, the further you get away from the window, or from the workout window, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's almost sounds pretty much like common sense that most people, well, I guess some people do have to be told that.
Yeah, sure they do. Yeah. Some people get carried away with that, and, they'll be posting Facebook, Instagram pictures of, eating cake all day, and you're like, well, all right, I guess that's cool, but, you're probably not going to be getting, the best results you can.
Well, now, so is there an advantage to eating a high glycemic index carb instead of a low glycemic index carb right after training?
Yeah, in general, that's kind of the time you can get away with eating a little bit, higher glycemic carbs. A few examples, most people, are going to have, your Gatorade powder or something like that sort of during the workout. And then, post-workout, maybe you can get away with, I don't know, you have a bunch of different choices there, Fig Newtons or something like that, sort of moderate to high glycemic index. You can sort of have those, after the workout. And, it has been shown, there's some studies, I know there's some, sort of debate out there about all the timing issues, but, chances are it's probably going to help your recovery a little bit better to have those high glycemic carbs after the workout.
Cool. What do you, I guess we need to wrap up. We got to get to training, and I know that you have a couple meetings coming up. Any last words by any of you guys here or Nick?
Not really. Covered everything pretty well. The only thing I would, say is, and it's not really against anything he said, but, I think that there are some times when cutting weight too soon before a meet can really get you into trouble, just because, again, that you have to have a certain amount of body mass, and you can easily lose strength if you cut too soon. I think that's kind of jives with what you said, but, you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, I think I've got some good information. So real quick, how would someone go about if they wanted to start working with you? Because, just having a structured plan, which is something that you would provide, really does help out a lot. It gives people a direction to go in, which makes things a lot easier. How would they go about working with you?
So you can find us on Facebook. You can just search for Renaissance Periodization, or you can just email us at renperiod@gmail.com. That's just renperiod@gmail.com.
Awesome.
All right, Nick. Well, thank you for coming on. I've been working with you for about 10 weeks. I've definitely had good results. You've changed a lot of my views on nutrition, and I really feel like I have a better understanding of kind of where I should be going with things. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, and maybe in a few months we can get a follow-up with you.
Real quick, coffee. What's your take on coffee? Coffee and weightlifting is huge.
Yeah, I mean, caffeine's, a great supplement. It's one of the sort of tried and true supplements, and, big fan of it. I don't drink a ton of it, but you certainly, in sort of pre-workout, I think it's a great idea. So.
Nice. And I guess a little plug for myself. Wellbeing Coffee has started sending me some coffee. I guess it's specialty coffee, and it's pretty good. Check them out. Try some of their...
Do you drink your coffee black or with cream?
Me, heavy cream. I say heavy cream for heavy weights. Now, something that you did mention that I thought was interesting is fat close to a workout. I try to not drink my coffee for a pre-workout because I put so much heavy cream in there. And from what I've heard is shouldn't really have a lot of fat before or after, right around training. So I actually don't use coffee with my heavy cream for the pre-workout.
But you have been using the Nutriforce Pre-Wad. So,
Nutriforce Pre-Wad,
You're getting a lot of caffeine in, so you're getting that bump up so that you can hit 143, 173 every workout is what you want.
Yeah, at least 3 times a week. That's my goal. Yeah,
Jeez.
Hitting those weights, and hopefully I'll be opening with those. They'll become openers for me.
Yeah, James is training for the Pan Am, so his training's going great. Yeah, so I'm excited to see how that's going to go. We got a Friday afternoon training, so we're going to hit it hard. And hopefully we'll see you guys earlier next week. So thank you, Nick. And, like I said, maybe in a few months we can get you back on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me on. And just 2 quick things I wanted to note. I was talking to my colleague last night, and he made sure that I told Mr. Pendlay that pretty much the only style rows that we do are all Pendlay styles. So.
Awesome.
That's right, man. Strict
Good to
form.
know.
And yeah, James, I think the not having a bunch of heavy cream before a workout's a great idea. If you have a bunch of fats before the workout, it can sort of leave you feeling sluggish and stuff, and it just kind of sits in your stomach. So I think that's a very very wise decision.
Nice.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening.